Okay, let's make a start. Right, well, good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to Educate's Supporting Dyslexic Students webinar. My name's Sarah. I am one of the account managers at Educate, but I also used to be a teacher specialising in SEND. So I've met Jo a few times now, and every time I've met her, it's been inspiring and we've had a great chat. So in a way, I'm quite disappointed that this is only going to go for 30 to 40 minutes because I think Jo will agree that we could go on and on about this topic. But yes, I'm really pleased to introduce you all to Jo. At the end of this session, the last sort of 10 minutes, we will have a Q&A. So if during the session, while Jo's speaking, you have a question, please do pop it into that Q&A box. And then we have Georgia in the background, our tech wizard, picking up those questions for us, and there'll be an opportunity to answer those later. But without further ado, I will pass over to Jo Rees, who is the founder of Dyslexic Life with Jo Rees. And she will tell us a bit about her background and her journey to becoming a dyslexic specialist. So over to you, Jo.
Thanks so much, Sarah, and thanks to Educate for inviting me today. And I have to say, Dyslexic Life of Jo Rees has to be the most undyslexic friendly email address ever. But anyway, that's what it is.
Oh, the irony.
Yeah, so like you, I trained as a primary school teacher, and just really enjoyed working with pupils that learnt differently, not even necessarily that had special educational needs. Like, I just loved working with children that was attracted to them a bit like a magnet, children that learn in a different way. And it was almost like I made it my mission to make sure that they secured concepts. So I guess that's where my kind of passion kind of started from. And because I was sort of naturally quite good at it, and I didn't realize at the time it was because I'm actually neurodivergent myself, I was late diagnosed with that. But I think because I was naturally quite good at it, I became a Senko really early on in my career. And then I had a couple of children and I decided I just wanted a change of career. I think it's really difficult when you're a parent and you've got children and you want to kind of have the best of both worlds. Sometimes it's tricky, and I knew I didn't want to be a deputy or a head teacher particularly because I didn't want to work full time at the time when my children were little. So I ended up kind of retraining, being sort of headhunted and getting a job as a specialist dyslexia teacher in an outreach provision. And yeah, it kind of went from there, really.
Amazing. So from your experience, what do you think dyslexic students struggle with the most?
Well, here's the thing from the very beginning, that I think there's a really big misunderstanding as to what dyslexia actually is.
Yeah.
And I think that, we are now thinking of dyslexia as more of a spectrum, and it's going to look different in every individual that's got it. And that's going to depend on their upbringing, their experiences, their underlying ability. But also, we know that so often you don't have just one learning difference. So again, it's going to depend on what is kind of co-occurring with it, I guess. But I guess we're really thinking about accessibility in terms of its literacy skill, which obviously is the whole way across the curriculum. It's very difficult to access any aspect of the curriculum if you haven't got fluent and secure reading skill. So I guess it's the reading, and even when dyslexics can read and they have developed mechanical reading skill, it's never automatic or fluent. It's genuinely really draining and really tiring. So the exhaustion levels and trying to keep up, the strain on working memory of trying to process all of the information. Classrooms are just really exhausting places.
So in terms of that classroom environment then, how could teachers make that more dyslexic friendly?
So I always say that the best thing, because I think we should also say, I really feel for teachers, I think they have a tricky job. I trained to be a primary school teacher, and I know that the training you have to support SEND is really limited. But I always think the most powerful thing you can do is ask your students, and even young primary school children, what do I do that really helps you learn? What do you find is really beneficial? Can you give me an example of when you learned something and it was really easy to learn and remember it, and almost have a conversation with them to unpick what it is, the best way for them to learn? And then equally ask them, what do I do that makes it really difficult for you to learn?
Yeah.
Like, what is it? Can you give me an example of when you really feel like you can't keep up, or what was happening at that time? And I'm not saying that teachers are going to be able to have all the answers to those questions and are going to be able to do what that student needs all the time. But actually, if you were to have a conversation with not just the dyslexic children, the neurodivergent children in your class, and just ask them those two questions, that is going to give you a bank of strategies and ideas and things straight away to be aware of, I think. But if we're thinking about strategies in general, I think it is limiting our language. So, we need to be aware that some dyslexics have really slow processing. So when they're not responding, they need time to make that connection. So it's no point continuing talking at them, because the more you talk at them, the more language there is for processing. So it's almost like building in opportunities for them to ask questions and have discussion. Sort of moving on to the second question, so I'll come back to a minute to the classroom. In the classroom, I think it's about having resources to hand, and them knowing where they can find things, where they can find the scaffolding. So if you've got learning walls, it's important that they're really clear and not cluttered, but so they can find the information that they need. If there are dictionaries or spell checkers or talking tins or word banks, it's having them in a place where students can access them.
And then they feel empowered, don't they, to actually manage their own needs as well.
Yeah. I had a conversation last night, actually. I was on Neurodiversity Stories last night, and I was talking a lot about parenting. So I'm a parent of 3 children with dyslexia as well. 2 of them are through the education system, 1 of them is year 11. And I was talking a lot about autonomy, and how actually, if we give children autonomy, they can often lead their own learning. Like, they know what they need to be successful. And I kind of get it, because I've been in a classroom with 30 children. I know you have to have some sort of management in it, and it's tricky. You can't have them all wandering around at the same time. But the flip side is, I think if you were to give them autonomy, there would be a bit of a phase possibly where they sort of took advantage of it. But then I think it would just level itself out. And actually, it would be much calmer, and they would feel more confident to access what they need. For me, autonomy is everything.
Sorry.
I was going to say, I feel like they need to feel like they have control over it. Like, sometimes I think dyslexics feel like education is being done to them. Like, you're in the classroom and you need to jump through this hoop and you need to jump through that hoop. And why haven't you done that? Not keeping up there. And you've only written 5 sentences and they've written 10. Whereas actually, if we were to give them autonomy, it's an experience that they're navigating their own way through. So it's almost like they're running their own race. So you drop that comparison and you build confidence in a different way.
We all know that reducing anxiety is the greatest barrier to learning, isn't it? Once you've broken that down, you can get through to the student, can't you? And what they need.
And a low confidence as well. If you're feeling like you're having negative experience after negative experience in the classroom, because every time you get up to go and get that word back, you're being told off because you're out of your seat, but actually you're just trying to get the tool that's going to help you. It's going to draw attention to the fact that you might need that tool, but B, it isn't promoting autonomy or allowing a dyslexic to use the strategies that they need to use.
So it's about communicating with students about their needs, giving them the resources they require, giving them the autonomy to discover those resources then. So in terms of, I suppose, have you got any practical tips for how teachers can, you spoke a bit about planning those lessons and actually planning in opportunities, how they could support their dyslexic students a bit more through their planning?
So for me, many dyslexics learn best by having a discussion and by asking questions. And if I'm really honest, I look back to my first year of teaching, and there were 2 children that drove me bonkers because they asked me so many questions. And now, knowing what I know, they were just classically dyslexic. And you know, they were so inquisitive. And what I've learned is that dyslexics ask questions. So you would have probably heard that old cliche, you know, big picture thinking or outside the box
Mm.
thinkers. And that it's cliche, but dyslexics ask questions because they're trying to make sense of where to put the new information and link it to the old information. So when they're asking questions or they're trying to have a discussion, they're trying to make sense of that new learning to work out where to file it away, where
Mm-hmm.
it fits into what they know already, and make sure that they can understand it. So for me, I think building in time for them to discuss, not even necessarily with the teacher, but with their peers. And you know, again, I know that they can't ask questions all the time, but actually, if you were to structure it, so you were to build in Q&A sessions, you might not have kids shouting out the whole time. So for me, I think questions is really helpful. Another thing I think that is really helpful, particularly the sort of science and geography, where the vocabulary, once we get into secondary school, the vocabulary becomes very technical and
Mm.
almost like another language, like
Yeah.
almost like it's like so, and lots of it is really similar, lots of it is kind of Latin. So actually, checking in with your students that they understand the vocabulary and that they are familiar with the vocabulary, because often I find that dyslexics aren't able to access a task because they're not familiar with the vocabulary. Because they're not familiar with the vocabulary, they're trying to process it and make sense of it. So then they're not focusing, they can't retain it. Whereas
Mm.
actually, if we could pre-teach the vocabulary in this at secondary the same way we did at primary and kind of double check that, you know, they're really secure of the vocabulary related to each topic before we go into each lesson, I think that's going to make a big difference. You know, even if at the start of each lesson you had a focus on a couple of the words that were in a topic. But
Mm.
I also say it's a really good thing to hand to parents at parents' evening of dyslexic children. And you know, it's one of the recommendations I always put in my secondary reports as an assessor. You know, ask your child's teacher for the vocabulary for the topic that they're learning, and then you
I
can do
can
it
see
with
how
them
that would
at home.
benefit everyone,
Yeah,
actually. Yeah,
yeah, yeah. It's something
definitely.
Educate should consider actually, like in terms of
We
yeah,
do
you've
have
got
some key
vocab,
vocab
haven't you?
stuff. Yeah, yeah, we're
Yeah,
very, it was something that was recommended that we built in,
yeah. But
definitely.
I think the key vocabulary and nailing that
Yeah.
makes such a big difference because what we're aiming for with dyslexics is we're aiming for automaticity, which sounds like a really posh word, but basically we're aiming for that kind of instant recall.
Mm-hmm.
So actually, the more we do something, the more we hear something, the more automatic and the more fluent that becomes. So if you think you could probably make, please don't go and do it, but you could probably make a cup of tea in your kitchen more or less with your eyes closed. Like you probably use no working memory capacity really
Yeah.
at all to be able to do that. To the point where you probably know how to pour how much water with the size of the mug, because it's automatic because we've done it so many times. So actually, that's what we want to be doing with, you know, with the vocabulary, making as much as we can automatic so that they've got capacity to think and make new connections.
Yeah, and strengthen those connections the more they do it.
Mm.
Yeah.
Mm.
And I suppose that vocabulary could be another one of those resources in class, couldn't it? That they
Yeah,
can then draw
absolutely.
on when they're ready
Yeah,
to.
and you know,
Yeah.
it's such a great thing to have on a learning or you know whatever kind of strategies because again, we don't want we want displays up, but we don't want them to be kind of overstimulating for our
Mm-hmm.
pupils, you know, for pupils that are ASC or have got sensory processing. But actually, you know, to have terminology up that's easy to access and to know where to look for that you're kind of revisiting is really helpful, I think.
Yeah.
Because the other thing dyslexics struggle with is naming. Like, you know, we know what things are, but sometimes we can't get to the name quickly enough.
It's
So
there
actually in a
somewhere.
science lab,
Yeah.
you know, if you've got things labeled of what they are and you know where to look for that, that's going to take a huge strain away from
Mm-hmm.
working memory.
Definitely. Now we need to mention the dreaded homework words because obviously some of us can't get away from it. Schools have
No.
homework policies. What can teachers do to make homework as dyslexia friendly as possible? You talked a bit about fatigue.
Yeah,
Obviously, we have to take that
yeah,
into account. Those minds need rest, but the homework still has to be done. What
yeah.
would you suggest?
well, we joked yesterday on the practice, didn't I? And I said, don't set any. But I do appreciate that sometimes it's a good opportunity for overlearning. But that's kind of I think when we're setting homework, we have to think about the purpose of it. Like, is it
Yeah.
a rehearsing task? Is it a moving the child forward task? Like, I think it's about thinking about the purpose of homework, and you might be setting it for different purposes or different reasons. But I think, you mentioned there the fatigue. And again, I mentioned in another interview in the last couple of weeks, dyslexic fatigue is real. And if you think as an adult, you wouldn't now think, oh, I know, I'm going to find a week's worth of courses and I'm going to go on one on Monday, one on Tuesday. You just wouldn't do that because your
No.
brain would be fried.
Yeah.
Yet we do that with children from Monday
Yeah.
to Friday. But on top of that, we say, oh, by the way, just take this work home and just complete this work. So I think thinking about the purpose, like, is it really necessary to set it? And if you are setting it, what is the purpose of it? Is it to just that overlearning to increase automaticity and improve, for example, maths equations and processes? We definitely need to practice those over and over again to kind of nail them. So I think it's about thinking the purpose of it from a parent perspective, because I've seen some of the names and I know I've got some parents on here. From a parent perspective, I think it's about routine, and it's about thinking about the right time of day for your child to do the homework. So, often when children come in at the end of the day, they are really tired. They get more tired as the week goes on. So, I shared recently that actually the time we used to do our homework was first thing in the morning. And I appreciate mornings can be crazy, but actually I had 3 children under 5, so they were very close together in age. But we just found for us there were less battles. We did it while we had breakfast out, and that just worked for us. It isn't going to work for everybody, but I think it's about having really clear expectations and meeting the child halfway. The other thing I would say about homework, we need to bear in mind that it does need to be differentiated in as much as, remember, dyslexics often have a slower working speed. And if they're fatigued, it's going to be even slower. So I've had this with one of my children in particular where, school would say, well, just do half an hour. But actually, she's barely scraping the surface in half an hour. So, I have had to have a lot of conversations with school about, how can we make this easier for her? Exactly the thing I've just said to you there, like, is it necessary? Is it purposeful? We actually do a lot of nailing the key vocabulary, but also I think this is where Educate, joking apart, I know you're here from Educate, but I think, joking apart, that kind of repetition and that online learning where they can almost track their own progress, and tap into things is really good. And it's also really good because teachers can see at a glance who has got what concept, as opposed to trawling through worksheets and trying to mark books. So, and I actually
and
I'm
also,
paid to say that, but I think, joking
thank you.
apart, I do think that things like Educate, and there's lots of you out there, lots of different apps and things out there, but I think that works really well for teachers and for students because you can quickly see where you need to plug a gap.
And students can dip in and do it at their own pace. So
Yeah.
with your student who was supposed to do as much as you could in half an hour, I would have actually said to her, well, you've got these 30 questions to do. You can do them over the course of the week. Just do a couple, see how you feel, dip in and out again and things like that.
Yeah.
I might just dive in there and chat a little bit about Educate since we mentioned it, if that's all right,
Yeah, go for
it. Because, like I said, I used to be a SEND teacher, and one of the things I love about Educate is that we do massively promote SEND, and we're trying to make Educate as accessible as possible. So the homepage, this is just a student homepage I'm sharing with you, really friendly, really easy to see what you've got to do at a glance. And we've just introduced some new accessibility options actually. So if a student logs into Educate, so if you are a parent of an Educate student or a teacher, you might not be aware of this because it's so brand new. They can click on their account button at the top, and they have loads of options now to change their background colour theme. We worked a lot with looking at the British Dyslexia Association guides with different background themes, and also we looked at some of their recommended fonts, so students can now change their font if they need to. We noticed quite interestingly, Jo, I don't know if this has come up in your experience, that different shades of yellow seem to be useful.
Yeah, so I'm an Erlen screener as well as a dyslexia assessor, and Erlen is controversial, but there are sort of almost, yeah, three, there's a yellow, a dark yellow and a peach. Yeah, so
Yeah.
yeah.
So that's an interesting one. So yeah, students can have that from their account, and that would just be default for them. But also, if they're in the middle of a quiz and they maybe haven't found these options, I'll just dive straight back there. They can also change those options during the quiz as well. So this is our default. They can just click on colours and fonts and just change those. We've got some more font sizes and things coming soon as well. So we're still working to improve on these things. But yeah, I just wanted to dive in and explain that a bit more. And these have all come from requests from students, from parents, from research we've done, and also looking at the Braille Institute as well, some of that work too. So yeah, I will just unshare that. Bear with me. So in terms of, I suppose, how can schools, what organisational things, Jo, could schools do on their umbrella to support teachers to support their dyslexic students right at the top?
It's really tricky. It is really tricky because I get that there aren't many budgets for training and
Yeah.
things, but I do actually think that it's really important that you have a dyslexic champion in your school that is level 5 qualified or above, really. Because unfortunately you don't know what you don't know, and I speak from a place of love when I say that, because I didn't know. When I look back now and think, oh my goodness, I failed so many dyslexic children,
I
because
think,
I didn't know what I was looking
yeah,
for.
I think a lot of us, I say this from when I was teaching, we thought dyslexia was just about reading and writing.
Yeah,
And I still think a lot of people do think that. And there's the
yeah.
organizational issues under that as
And
well.
that's as a result of, that's as a result of working memory and processing.
Mm.
That's why organization is tricky, because of the strain on working memory. So I think, again, it's tricky, but it's having clear teachers having a clear understanding of what dyslexia is, and really recognizing that one size doesn't fit all.
Mm-hmm.
Just because you've done a dyslexic screen, handing out a yellow overlay, an overlay doesn't really support dyslexia, it's visual stress, but actually you need to do a little bit more testing than that. You need to be doing a visual stress test. It's almost about what is your procedure in school to identify your dyslexic students, and then what is, the Senko should be able to coordinate, shouldn't they, what an offer looks like for a dyslexic student. So you've almost got like a menu of things that you can pick from.
So it's building that pupil profile and
Yeah,
really understanding what works.
definitely. And that brings me right back to the most powerful thing: have a conversation with the
Yeah.
child, but also the parent. Like, I've got a real thing at the minute that so I'm writing a book at the moment, which is a parent guide for dyslexia, and I've got a whole chapter on that parent. And I really hate that phrase. Like, it
Yeah.
makes me, because it implies that that parent is being difficult. And the flip side is, as teachers, I can remember you complain when a parent isn't engaging, but then when you've got a parent that's saying, actually, my child is coming home and they're really upset, or they're really struggling with this, and can, like, then it's not right, because you're asking too many questions and you're becoming too involved. But joking apart, parents have got a lot of insight
And
into,
if they want to collaborate, take that.
yeah,
Yeah.
it has to be it has to be a collaboration. And I think, like I say, no teacher is going to be able to implement everything all the time. But sometimes just being aware, saying to that student, I know you really find it really difficult to copy from the board, but I'm really sorry, I haven't had a chance to photocopy that worksheet or whatever it is today. I will try and do it for you afterwards, or just do your best and I'll come over afterwards and fill in the gaps. Or I think sometimes just smiling at a student and just saying, I see you. I can't meet your need in this class, but I do see you. And tomorrow I'll try and meet your needs and not somebody else's. I think just recognizing and having a bit of empathy and understanding, I think, can go such a long way.
And that's almost a behaviour management technique in itself, isn't it? Because
Yeah,
if you're seeing that negative behaviour, look for the reasons behind it
yeah,
and actually say, well, I know this isn't right for you and that's why this lesson isn't working out, but bear with me, I'll improve. And I like that. Yeah.
you
Hearing
know,
them, isn't it? It's just
yeah,
hearing them.
yeah,
Yeah. You, we've obviously just got through September.
yeah,
You talked a bit about the challenges of organisation for our dyslexic students. I
yeah,
can imagine no bigger challenge has happened for students recently than our dyslexic year 7 students. I mean,
yeah,
could you just give us a bit of advice about transition for them?
yeah. So I think any year back tricky for a dyslexic child. But year 7 in particular, because you're getting used to a new building,
Yeah.
new routes, where you think of the strain on working memory in that first bit until it becomes automatic. You know, some schools have a crazy 2-week rotating timetable, don't they? So like dyslexic children never learn never ever learn their timetable. So, you know, it's about patience, but I also think it's about looking at how you can structure that. So I've never worked in a secondary school. I go in and do exam access arrangements, but I've never been involved in like the organisation of a secondary school. But you know, I've had children go through secondary school, and you know, we always have 3 or 4 copies of their timetable,
Hmm.
and they always used to have one in their blazer, you know, one in their school bag, one stuck at home, and then we would have a spare one. So it's having it available because of the strain on working memory, and sometimes we just don't take things in quickly, especially when we're anxious. Having that timetable to hand so they can check it as many times as possible and kind of know what they're doing. You'll also find possibly that dyslexic and ADHD students either have super heavy bags with everything in it or completely empty bags with nothing in it.
And all their stuff is in different classrooms
It
around the school, right?
tends to
Yeah.
be one or the other, not in between with dyslexic and ADHD students. But I think, you know, it's being clear where your locker is.
Mm.
It's also being really patient with students when they haven't got their book, when they haven't got a pen. Like they probably haven't done it intentionally. It's just it's got left somewhere because they've been stressed. And I think, you know, actually we really want to make them feel safe and secure in that transition time. So I think for me, it's a lot about practicing the processes, practicing moving around the school. And it's interesting because so often, you know, they do a move up with vulnerable students often kind of separately, don't they, before the move up days? But actually, I think dyslexic students should be included in that because
Mm.
it is familiarizing themselves with the routines and things. I mean, I've done with my kids before. It's a bit too late now because we're well into October, but you know, we used to practice the school run, we used to practice our timings getting to the bus, all of those sorts of things, and structuring it. And if I'm really honest, I've done a lot. I don't really have very many expectations of school, and I manage what I can from the outside. One of the things I would say, which is quite helpful for not just year 7 students, all students, is make sure when they transition to secondary that they have an advocate in school. Now, that doesn't mean that I've gone in and I've gone, I need to, who will my child's advocate be? That's not how it works.
Yeah.
Once they've kind of settled and they've built relationships with people and they've sort of sussed out who their safe person would be, you know, one year it was a dinner lady, another person it was a receptionist, another year it was a TA in a particular area. This was at secondary school. When things went a little bit wrong or they needed a bit of help advocating or negotiating on the inside, they would go and find the person that they felt safe with to share their worries or say, I haven't got my pen today. Have you got any spare ones? And also
I
the other
love
thing,
that. Yeah.
when you have like an internal person, like so often with so many internal politics in schools that we as parents are not aware of, and we don't need to be aware of them. But you know, we might be really frustrated that a teacher isn't doing something, but actually that teacher may have a parent that is really unwell that you know that they're nursing, or
Yeah.
you know they may be under competency. Like you don't know the dynamics of what's going on. So I've always found by having that internal person, it's somebody that's a bit more clued up as to what's going on. I don't need to know what's going on, but they can then help my children advocate from the inside navigating those
Mm.
politics, if that makes
That's
sense.
amazing. That's really helped me personally because I'm looking at secondary schools for my son at the moment,
Mm.
and we're due to have his EHCP review in a few weeks, and I've got to recommend a school, and
Yeah,
it's all those things that I'm scared about, that organisation aspect, that idea that he's not going to know where to go, and I think I love that idea of an advocate, a safe person
yeah.
where they can
But like I say, it isn't like
share their
I've
voice.
gone and gone, right, okay, who's your advocate going to be? Like, it's
Yeah,
never been like that. It's
got to be
just sort of,
natural.
it's really evolved, but
Yeah.
we've sort of worked it out quite quickly, sort of within the month, who that person could possibly be. And it
Mhm.
makes a big difference.
Yeah. So before we quickly go on to Q&A, let's think about the other end of the school,
Yeah.
those GCSE students. What, in a nutshell, if you can put it in a nutshell, what can teachers do to help dyslexic students prepare for their GCSEs?
My top tip. So it's that key vocabulary. It's nailing the key vocabulary. And actually, by the time we're doing GCSEs, we should more or less be choosing subjects that we like.
Mm-hmm.
The other thing I would say is that as teachers, we need to recognise that our subject that we're really passionate about might not be that child's passionate subject. So just because they're capable of getting a particular grade in that particular area doesn't mean that we should be pushing them, because dyslexic students do get really overwhelmed, and spinning a lot of plates is really, really tricky. So I think it's about checking that they are not feeling overwhelmed with all of the subjects, checking what grade they would be happy with. So I've done this with all of my children. I've done it with my godchildren. I've done it with any children that we're really close with. And when they start year 10, we write down what GCSEs they're taking, and the child writes down. Nobody has to see that. Sometimes we've seen it, but sometimes they've literally put it in an envelope and kept it safe. But they write down each subject and what grade would make their heart happy. So not
Oh, I
a
like that.
parent's heart happy, not a
Yeah.
teacher's heart happy. Like, when you imagine yourself opening your GCSE results, what grades are going to make your heart happy? Because that can then really help you work out where to prioritise, where to focus the revision. I also think revision needs to happen little and often as they go along. And I often say one of the best things you can do is, as you cover topics from the beginning of year 10, have a book, have it in your phone somewhere where you write down the subject, but you write down the topic, colour code it green, amber, red, in terms of
Mm.
how confident you feel. Because then when it comes to revision, because what if we're not careful, we tend to revise what we know because we
Yeah.
can't remember what we don't know. So actually, having that list as you go along, you then, when it comes to creating a revision timetable, you go to your list. Where are my red topics that I need to revisit? And then again, you
Mm.
can use things like Educate, YouTube, those sorts of things to fill in those gaps on those topics. There's lots more I could share with you, but I'll probably leave it there for now, just because I know we're running out of time.
But we have a red, amber, green rating on Educate as well. So when students go in and look at their
Yeah,
self-study, it's really clear where those gaps are. And it will also show them the number of questions they've answered in their self-study as well. So
yeah.
they can be very careful about topics they might be ignoring slightly.
Yeah, yeah,
Um,
that's exactly it.
yeah.
It's not intentional, but why would you think to study something you don't enjoy? You wouldn't.
Exactly. It's making sure you've got that breadth of study, isn't it? Yeah, brilliant.
Yeah,
Right, well, we should move on to the Q&A before we run out of
yeah,
time. We do have a question from Helen. I think this is probably one I need to field, but you might need to
yeah.
dive in. Helen says, our students use Educate for Science homework every week. As Jo has said, the topic words and reading are difficult. Yeah. Is there a way to have the questions read and vocabulary explained on the quizzes? So the questions read bit is very easy because Educate is compatible with a variety of screen readers. So Helen, if you're not sure which ones to use, do email us and we can send you some particular compatible ones. I think Natural Reader is one I've used in the past. Does that ring a bell with you, Jo? It's a really good one, and it's really compatible as well. In terms of having the vocabulary explained, that is something I will definitely speak to our editorial team about. I think there is more we could do there. It's a tricky one because it involves creating glossaries and all sorts of things. But we do also have, I'm not sure, most of our science subscribers should be aware that we've got a command words section on Educate now as well. So if you just want to practice those exam command word questions, you can do entire quizzes just on that too. Question for you, Jo. This is a good one. What would be the easiest ways and practical methods of assessing children you suspect of having dyslexia?
So I'm assuming that question means as in assessing them at the end of a topic as opposed to assessing them for dyslexia.
Oh yeah, you could look at it both ways, couldn't you?
So
I think I was thinking about it from a perspective of a teacher who might think that a student has dyslexia and they
yeah,
want to
so I
find out
think
a bit
so
more.
if we're looking at it from that perspective, then it's about having a conversation with your Senko and asking them to screen. There are also loads of free checklists out there that you can build a bit of a picture. But I think in terms of kind of finding out whether they're dyslexic or not, it's free checklists and the Senko and the screeners. That would be the route to go with that. And then in terms of if we were assessing them at the end of a topic, this is a really tricky one because at the end of the day, they have to take exams. And we want to be skilling them up to be able to take their exams. However, what often happens is the normal way of working doesn't get put into practice. So this is actually a really amazing question in as much as if you know that a child is going to need something to be read to them so that they can access that assessment, the earlier you do that, the quicker it becomes their normal way of working. Now, I'm not saying you read to them all the time because that doesn't develop independence and we still need to be developing literacy skill. But what we also need to be careful of, at secondary in particular, that the literacy skill isn't a barrier to them being able to make progress in a specific subject. So I would say it's really about looking at what accessibility arrangements are available. So scribe and 25% extra time needs to be signed off by an assessor, but if it's a normal way of working, that would trigger that happening. You can also have a word processor. You can also have things read to you, human or computer reader. You can also have a prompt to help keep you on task. And I feel like I'm missing something. Rest breaks is the other thing that you can have.
Oh, yeah.
And actually rest breaks are a seriously underutilized exam access arrangement for dyslexics because if you think so in a rest break, you have to put the pen down, you can't do anything. But actually for a dyslexic brain, that's really good because it stops and it lets the processing catch up. And often we
reset.
we make those connections. So I would say it's going to need to be about school policy because, and I hate saying that, but I think it is going to have to be about school policy because if you're the only teacher assessing in that way, it isn't going to be helpful for them going forward. But I think it's about looking at how you can tie it in with the accessibility, but also if we're looking at the whole child and we're looking at improving confidence and self-esteem, again, what is the purpose of the assessment? Is it to ascertain that they have secured the knowledge and the skills, or is it to measure what they can remember through their literacy skill? Because actually, if it's about skilling them up to check that they have understood that topic, then they can do that verbally.
Yeah, it's removing the barriers, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely.
I think this is a really good question to end on because it kind of wraps everything up really nicely. But Hayley has asked, how do non-dyslexic students also benefit from more dyslexia conscious teaching?
Well, it's just friendly, isn't it? Like it's not gonna hinder them at all. And actually, you'll probably find that they will excel and be a lot more independent as well. You know, if you're building in things like breaks and having discussions, they're going to be able to lead some of those discussions and drive their own thinking and other people's thinking forward. Like actually non-dyslexics are real assets in a classroom in terms of because it takes we need everybody in this world, don't we? We need really academic brains and
Yeah.
really fluent readers as much as we need people that think outside the box. So I think it's about kind of supporting each other. But, dyslexic friendly practice, quality first teaching, it used to be called when I was in school, like that benefits everybody.
Yeah,
It
I
doesn't
totally
hurt
agree.
anybody at all.
I totally agree. Oh, thank you, Jo. So
Welcome.
we do have to wrap up, sadly, but if people want to continue this conversation with you, or if they want to reach out, where are the best places to follow you, Jo?
So I am on LinkedIn with Jo Rees, but everywhere else, well, I say everywhere else, Facebook, Instagram, and TikTok, I'm at Dyslexic Life with Jo Rees, and my website is at Dyslexic Life with Jo Rees. And I've got loads of resources to support parents. I've got paid programs, I've got free webinars. But yeah, that's where you can find me.
And you're a busy lady, and you're on the Isle of Wight, aren't you? Which I
Yeah,
just love. I love that fact about you, that you join us
yeah,
from the Isle of Wight. It just
yeah.
feels a bit special. And if anyone would like to know a bit more about Educate, I will just quickly share with you where you can sign up. So if you're not already subscribed to Educate, you can go on to educate.co.uk, and we have a free 30-day trial that you can sign up for, and you can also book a demo. So if your learning style is that you just like to have a chat with somebody, please do book a demo and have a chat with one of our fantastic team. But thank you everybody for joining us today. Thank you so much, Jo, for your time. I told you all it would be inspiring. It was. Thank you. It was brilliant. I've learned a lot, both as a professional and a parent, so thank you. The recording of this will be shared in a few days' time. So if anyone missed a bit or wants to watch this back or share it with their teams, please do have a look at the recording and check it out. But
Thank you
have a
so
great
much for
evening, Jo.
inviting me.
Well, thank you for joining us. It's been brilliant, and I hope we can work with you again in the future.
Cool.
Best of luck with your
Thank
work. I
you.
think it's great what you're doing, and have a lovely evening. Take
Thank
care.
you. You too.
Bye,
See you later.
everybody. Bye bye.